Hello, everybody. Welcome to McBiz, the radio show of the Martin County Business Exchange Club. I'm Lee Carroll from Deacons Carroll Insurance Agency here with Big Frank Mezzapel on the board. I'm glad to be back,
indeed.
Big Frank.
Yes, good to see you.
You seem to be saying I've been away a bunch this spring and early summer, so we're going to be here for a while now. All the traveling stuff is over with for a bit anyway.
I've got some different songs I've queued up for you in your honor, so this is one of them.
My honor.
All right. Little Ricky Nelson for you, right?
He was one of my wife's boyfriends.
I'm a traveling
He had 7 or 8 of them.
He's
one of them.
All right.
He's one of the dead ones. Some of them are still alive.
Yeah. The
Justin Timberlake is the youngest one.
Oh, yeah. It's a problem, right?
Yeah, he's still around.
All right. So if you wear the right hat, this could be your other. Whoops. Wait a minute. That didn't work out. Let me fix that.
Boy, people are going to think we're a government operation. You keep screwing up.
Right? There you go. Okay. This is if you wear the right hat, this will be your next one.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So, kind of an exploring nature, about what you do when you travel, right?
Yeah. And by the way, I was in a place that had really, really clean water.
Oh.
Our guest today might know a little bit about it and certainly knows something about water. Roy Spicer, Dr. Roy Spicer. Now, I was going to talk to him about my foot, but I understand he's not that kind of a doctor.
No, he can't help you.
But he can tell us a whole lot
tell you
about
how to keep
water.
Your foot clean.
Right, that's true. And he can tell you about water, and he can tell you about how to get your water better. So we want to welcome from Clean Water Revival, hallelujah, Dr. Roy Spicer to our show today. Welcome, Roy.
Pleasure to be on the show today.
All right.
And, oh, man, you're the man today, Big Frank.
Well, CCR there, sure.
Actually, now, Roy, you've been on our show before, and I'm glad to have you back again. Water is in the news a lot around here lately. In fact, I think it's the front page of the newspaper here every day for the last 9 years. You think there was no other subject, but of course, you're involved with water, not necessarily the river water, but the water that comes out of people's taps and comes out of their bottles that they get and all that kind of stuff. Clean Water Revival is in business to make sure that people get as clean a water as possible. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Now, is the water that we get out of our tap perfect water?
Well, there's a lot of definitions of what you consider potable water, clean water, safe water. The water meets standards set by the federal government, but I wouldn't call it safe or necessarily clean.
So to lead in here, I guess that the federal water standards aren't necessarily what you would want for optimum health.
That's correct. They're arbitrary values that they place on contaminants in the water. For example, arsenic, they allow 10 parts per billion. Now, 10 parts per billion, if you drink that water with arsenic at that level, it won't kill you right away. But if you drink it for 10, 20, 30 years, the arsenic accumulates in your body, and it will contribute to certain types of cancers. So they allow it, but it's not necessarily safe over a long period of time.
Now, I'm going to interrupt this story for a moment here. Arsenic. They talk about people being poisoned on that investigative ID channel where people get murdered and they figure out how they murdered them or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. If I ever die mysteriously,
I
want everybody to go back and watch every one of those shows, and they will figure out how my wife did it because she loves that show. Arsenic made me think about it. So you get Roy on the case.
Are you starting to lose your memory and get warts on your face?
Not yet.
Like that?
Not yet. And nothing's shrinking that I'm aware of yet either.
Except your brain.
Joke.
Your brain might be shrinking.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, that's
well,
you're
not
hydrating
enough. That's the problem.
There it is. But anyway, I just want to point that out. Okay. That Sheriff Snyder spoke at our group today.
He did.
Everybody, you get him to get one of the detectives to watch every one of those shows for the last 5 years, and he'll figure out how she did it. Go ahead, Roy. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I had to make that announcement.
Speaking about your feet, I think you should soak your feet in Epsom salt. It's very healthy for you.
There you go. But talk about our water. The kind of I don't know. Not all of our listeners have city water, or what technically I guess here is county water, at least in Martin County. And of course, we have listeners in Port St. Lucie, 2 people from Port St. Lucie over time have told me they've listened to our show. And by the way, we're up to 48 people have told me they listened to our show. So most of our 48 listeners are probably drinking tap water, but some of them are getting water out of their well. Talk to us about the difference and things that they can do, that your company can do to make them healthier.
Well, first thing is understanding the myth of clean water. What is clean water? Basically, it's H2O and some normal minerals. That, to me, is clean water.
Right. Because water does not, natural water contains minerals.
Correct.
To some degree.
And then you have to have potable water. Now, potable water in the United States means that you don't have any disease-causing microorganisms in the water. That's why we disinfect the water here. And many countries around the world, and the most common cause of death is waterborne disease in the world.
Right.
You're living in countries that don't disinfect the water. Their source water is contaminated with very harmful disease-causing bacteria. It could be cholera, it could be bilharzia. There's a whole range of viruses. As a matter of fact, I got 2 calls in the last month. One customer was going to Zanzibar in Tanzania, so I had to give them special equipment. Then another customer was going to Morocco and Guyana, which is not very healthy.
Right. Now, the special equipment you gave them, or something they can use, like some kind of stem pin they can put in the water and radiator or whatever. What's that called?
I reckon SteriPen.
SteriPen.
That's one of the things we use. We use a travel filter made out of ceramic. So you start out with their bottled water, which is probably contaminated. You put it into the gravity filter, a ceramic, which takes out parasites and bacteria. And then the water that gets through there, you dip this little ultraviolet pen in it, which will kill any viruses. So then it's microbiologically safe. So you're not going to die of some, bizarre infection and bring it back with you. I used to work for the Department of Health in New Jersey, and I used to see these really weird microorganisms come back from people, especially with Mexico. They call them travelers. So you eat something over in these foreign countries, it has a parasite, it gets into your system, you bring it back home, and over a period of 20 years, it eats your brain, it eats your heart, and eventually you die.
What about
that's one of the types of problems you're going to run into, but those parasites are pretty easy to filter out of water.
So if somebody has that issue, and of course you mentioned about eating in Mexico, but if somebody's in Tanzania, let's say, and they are going to drink the water, they can go to you to get the filters and the pen to put in it. They might look like a dork worrying about all that stuff, but it's no fun to come home with that parasite in your body.
I've seen a lot of people come back with some really serious infections that can be life-threatening.
And they can stop that they can still have the adventure of going to those places.
Right. But water is a big issue outside the United States as far as pathogens and potable water. So to get back to the subject of potable water, in the United States, the water is potable. That's the primary function of most municipal treatment companies. They have to make the water potable. And they do that by adding chemicals, particularly chlorine and now chloramine, which is a combination of chlorine and ammonia. So it's a double-edged sword. You have to kill the bacteria and the viruses, but on the other hand, you're getting residual chemicals in your drinking water that get into the system, and they move down the pipes, and eventually some of that will get into your tap water. And those chemicals, which are not just chlorine and chloramine, it's the byproducts that are formed when they move down the pipes, they're considered carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals by the EPA, the Class B carcinogens. So when you drink water and you shower and bathe in it, you're absorbing it into your body. And again, it's another chemical substance that's toxic to your body.
And over time is when the real issue. It's not like you're going to drop dead right then.
No, exactly. Again, it's another layer of environmental toxins that are ingested, breathed in, or absorbed, or eaten in your food, whether it's pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, or other chemicals, glyphosate. These are all toxic chemicals that we're being loaded up with. And this is why we're seeing an increase in a lot of different types of cancers and other diseases, especially in younger children today.
Now, do you think any of those are reasons Big Frank can use for his memory loss and things like that?
No, that's typically either genetic or it's just
age-related.
Yeah, age-related.
Yeah,
it's probably that.
I came up with another solution when you're traveling abroad and you don't want to, don't want to drink the local water, right? Don't get ice cubes.
Right.
That's a problem.
I made a mistake doing that one time going to Mexico. Now, a question for you to go back with what's the name of those pens again?
SteriPens.
SteriPens. I have a couple of friends that went to Tanzania and to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And when they got there, boom, boom, and they went up the mountain and they were doing everything associated with that. But then after that, they kind of went on safari and did some other things. And one guy had a pen. I don't know if he had a filter. I wasn't smart enough to ask if his buddy had a filter, or my guy had a filter, but he did have the pen. And his buddy did not. And his buddy came back and ended up in the hospital like 6 weeks. He lived in Houston or something. But
Wow.
but they both ate basically the same thing. But one guy was diligent and used the pen, and the other guy didn't. So that stuff clearly must work. It's not a coincidence that the guy that didn't use the pen is the one that got sick.
Sure. Well,
and it wasn't
that's probably likely what he did. He drank some water that was contaminated. You know, the thing here, you asked me about wells, and there's different sources of water. You have surface water sources, lake, streams, river, reservoirs, and you have wells.
Now, you highly recommend we do not drink water out of our river right now, right?
No, I would not. Unless you have a death wish.
It's funny. It's sad that we're having to laugh about something like that, because you can't. Otherwise, you cry.
Right.
I mean, I was astounded. I lived in New York almost all my life. I moved to Florida 10 years ago.
I thought I detected a slight accent.
It's slight.
It's called a speaking dysfunction. It's dialect. Dialect. I had actually a speech pathologist watch me on TV one time, and she said I had to read Shakespeare to correct it. So I said, I'll stick with what I have. And, I get abused a lot.
Plus, Shakespeare will put you to sleep anyway.
So the
editorial
point
comment, not related to WSTU.
Yeah, but I was astounded when I moved up here to Stewart 4 years ago. When I saw that algae plume was the last year or the year before. It was just
it was 2 years ago. Yeah.
I never seen anything like that in my life. It was, 3 feet thick.
Yeah,
our river looked like it was in Ireland. It was so green.
Oh,
it looked like you were looking at a prairie in Ireland, because it was a field in Ireland. It was so unbelievably green.
Yeah, that was
it's science
terrible.
fiction, isn't it?
That was terrible. So that's a whole set of environmental problems that they're going to have to work on. And I see some glimmer of hope there. But it has to be addressed big time, and it's a difficult problem.
So you need to have algae eating bacteria or something.
Well, we just don't want to feed it. You don't want to feed those things like mold or anything else. You just don't want to feed it nutrients,
right?
Which is the agricultural waste and other waste that gets into the river from emptying the Okeechobee and other things.
Right.
Now, we interrupted you when you were talking about the various types of water.
Well, well water is commonly used for our drinking water. In Martin County, particularly, use wells. They treat it. There's a lot of private wells. I was just out working on a well today, which wasn't too bad. Wells can be pretty decent, depending on where they're located and how deep they are.
Is deeper better?
There's a sweet spot. What I'm learning, after working with well drilling companies, each area has its own particular hydrogeology, so they have a depth that's ideal. I mean, you're still going to get the iron sometimes, or hardness, or other contaminants, but you'll have a minimal amount if you get to the right depth. Some of the wells we see are shallow wells, which are less expensive to drill. They seem to be a little more problematic, where they have more iron, possibly hydrogen sulfide. So it depends on the depth of the well where you're drilling it. And if you get a good well driller, I work with a company, Coastal Waterworks, a very good company. We're out today looking at a well. He cleaned it up, and we did a great job on it. So the less contaminants you have, the easier it is to fix. It's just a simple thing. But well water is different than a lot of city water, because city water, if you have iron, they chlorinate it, it precipitates the iron, so you don't really have to deal with it as much.
But then you're dealing with the chlorine.
But you're dealing with the chemicals. So it's a different set of filtration equipment solutions. So we have to look at the water test results. This is the way we do it. We evaluate. I'm a doctor. I look at a water test like a blood test. So you have to diagnose what the problem is and provide a proper treatment to correct it and make the water clean and safe.
Now, and obviously, but part of the show is going to be you telling everybody how they can make those solutions. But if somebody's drilling a well, do they call you and say, "Hey, let us know when we've got the right depth here for the best water"?
Well, generally, if I deal with people all over the country, if they're drilling a new well, they need to get a local well driller that knows the area. That's a qualified person, and they usually know what depth to drill it. I'm working on another well up in Delaware that had to go 500 feet. That's a pretty deep well. You don't need to go that deep here in Florida. Usually it's 75, 85 feet to 110, 20 feet. So it's a total different solution. I'm not an expert on how deep to drill wells. We usually get a local well drill. Then we evaluate the
Now, I don't
water.
necessarily mean you to tell them how deep to drill, but once they get a certain depth and hit the water, they might call you to say,
right.
hey, tell us if this is good water or not.
We test it. We send out a test kit to a panel of tests, and they sample the water. We provide the kit. We instruct them how to test it. Then once we get the laboratory results back, then we provide an equipment solution. So it's all based on testing. Or if they're on municipal water that's published, I have the water quality results here for Martin County. So, for example, this is what they detected. They have barium, fluoride, nitrate, sodium. You have a little bit of radium in the water.
Now, isn't barium radioactive?
No, barium's not, but radium is.
Radium is.
You have trihalomethanes and HAAs. Those are the byproducts of chloramine. They're using chloramine in the water. And you have some lead and copper.
Now, are all those things good for you?
No. No, unless you want to get more neurologically impaired, it's in Frank's case, I wouldn't recommend drinking the water. He's very close to losing it completely.
Yeah. There you go.
We don't want to add to his problem.
That's right, because neither one of us know how to run this board in the station, so we've got to make sure he doesn't go off the cliff there.
Right, or fall asleep during the show, something like that.
All right, so we've done a really good job of telling everybody the problem. And we do want you to talk about other things later in the show, like bottled water and things like that. But tell our listeners, all 48 of them, how you can solve the problems of this, whether we want to call it contaminated water or less than as good as it can get water. Tell them what you guys can do, and then how they can reach you and things. Right. I know, because I've heard some really good success stories over the years that you've told about people that you've helped out. But
my primary objective right now is my company. We have different layers of business, different segments of business. I just got a call today. We do emergency filters. So last year we were helping the people down in the Caribbean, and it was horrible water down in Puerto Rico in particular. So we had to provide a lot of emergency filters. So what we do primarily to help people, there's two categories of people. Either A, they want to be healthy, or B, they have a severe illness and they need to clean up their indoor environment. So we want to make healthy indoor environments, because when you're recovering from a cancer or some other serious illness, you have to detoxify your body. You have to get rid of the existing toxins. You don't want to put more toxins in your body.
You don't want your water to add more toxins into your
exactly.
system.
And that, it's a cleansing process. It's a nutrient process. So we have to make sure the water is clean. That means it's free of contaminants. So what we do, again, if somebody calls me and they're referred by a doctor, or they just call us up off the internet, the first step is, look, we want to know where you live. We'll look up your water report. We have a form. We email them to fill out. We want to know how many people are in the house, have any concerns, health conditions, they see any staining anywhere. List of questions, about 10 questions. Then we put together a proposal, and we have to get a local plumber, and they have to look at their house, see if it'll fit, if they can install it, and we give them a total cost. So that, there's two parts you can do. Either sink first if they want to, because that's more cost effective, and that's your primary location, because that's your drinking water, your cooking water, rinsing. That's where you're going to get most of the exposure. When you put a filtration tank on the main pipe in the municipal water, that's going to take care of the chemicals and some of the heavy metals or special contaminants. So that reduces your total exposure, showers, baths, all your sinks, and then you can have clean water throughout the house. So there's different ways we handle it depending on the levels of contaminants and how much the customer wants to spend. We're very cost effective. We're an independent company. We're not a franchise, so I don't add 10 layers of cost.
And they're not somebody telling you to get a trip somewhere, you have to sell 14 of these kind of things on some kind of stuff. So you push that on everybody, right, just because you want to get your incentive thing.
Right. Plus, we're water quality specialists. My sales manager is a water quality specialist. I'm a PhD biochemist. I'm a level 5 water specialist. So we look at things a little differently than it's not an off-the-shelf system. We don't just slap a bunch of equipment in there. That's not going to be the best solution.
Right. It's not not like some big box store where you just go to the shelf and pull the one thing off.
Or these franchises, I'm not going to mention names, but they're out there.
Right. So somebody says, look, I just don't know if this water's any good. And they call you up, and before long, we want you to give the phone number here, because eventually Big Frank's going to tell us we have to be quiet so he can do a commercial. But how much does it cost for somebody to have you test it? And they might say, we don't care what the county says. We'd like you to test our water. Or if they have a well, they definitely would want you to test the water to figure out how to solve the issue. How much does something like that cost?
Minimum testing, including my consultation, about $175, $200 on a well. And it goes up to about $350 if we have to test for a whole panel of chemicals, pesticides, depending on, if they're on a farm area, if it's ever been farmed, or if they're in a toxic waste site. We have customers
near where there used to be a gas station leaking gas into the ground all the time.
MTBE, gasoline additives, things like that. Or we're working on 2 big toxic spills, one up in Michigan, where they have a new chemical, PFOA. It's a Teflon derivative. It's very toxic. And there's another spill in Oak Island, North Carolina. We're working with people over there. It's a series of chemicals came from Teflon, mostly, or fire retardants, is showing up in the water now. And there's some areas that have had some serious chemical spills. In those cases, they need more sophisticated equipment. And we follow the EPA guidelines because they've done the research. They hire universities or companies to research what systems work. So you may need, let's say, a softener. You may need 2 carbon tanks and a reverse osmosis for that particular chemical spill.
Now, how does a carbon tank? Well, neither one of those prices you quoted or will break anybody's bank. So that's an investment in your health right there. Even if you come back and tell them your water's good, at least now they know.
Right.
Now, tell us how a carbon tank works.
Well, carbon.
I've heard you talk about that before.
Carbon is an adsorbent. It weakly binds chemicals. It's like a sponge, more or less. So it attracts chemicals to it, and it binds it. Then what we do, all the water in the house goes through a carbon bed. It's a tank like the size of an oxygen tank. Could be 5 feet high and 10 inches, 12 inches diameter, or bigger, depending on how many people in the house. We also put in other special materials. It could be things like what's called KDF, which is a material that's antibacterial. It absorbs chlorine. We have special heavy metal removing materials. So there's a whole range of materials we use in addition to carbon, depending on what's in the water. So the water, every drop of water that comes in the house goes through this tank, comes in contact with the material. It's absorbed, and then it removes the chemicals from the water. Then when the water gets to the sink, we have other special filters that'll remove bacteria, parasites, other chemicals, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, fluoride, lead, a whole range of heavy metals. So by the time you get through those series of filters in the tank, you're drinking pretty clean water. It's 99% clean.
Now, the reason somebody doesn't want to just go get a filter off a shelf, because half the time those things may not get the kind of things they need to be worried about or concerned about, and you guys can put the specialty filters in the kit, for lack of a better term, that the system that you install for them, right?
Right. Well, if you start out, let's say the most ineffective filter on the planet is a pour-through pitcher.
Okay.
Right. It takes out minimal amounts of contaminants. It won't take out fluoride. It won't take out parasites. It won't take out industrial chemicals. So it's a starting point. So it's like, if you have an umbrella and you have rain and you have 10 holes in it, you'll get some protection, but it just doesn't. You're
still going to get wet.
You're going to get bypass or breakthrough. So when you design systems, they're very cost effective, but we look at what contaminants are in the water. We'll make sure we put enough filters in to take it all out. And we have people that are very concerned about it, especially with their children. They don't want them drinking lead or toxic chemicals, heavy metals, arsenic, particularly uranium. So we have filters that will remove all that.
Now, how do people get in touch with you?
They call our 800 number, which is 800-444-3563. That's 800-444-3563. Or go on the internet. Our website is CWRenviro.com.
And CW stands for Clean Water.
Clean Water Revival.
Hallelujah.
All right. And we'll be right back. And now it's time for today's Southeast AgNet Report, brought to you by Everglades Farm Equipment, a family-owned business for the past 50 years with 10 Florida locations, including Fort Pierce, Okeechobee, and Loxahatchee. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right,
a little bit of Creedence Clearwater, which fits right in.
My favorite group.
There you go. I think they were here one time at the Lyric.
I think so.
I remember listening to them.
Yeah.
And boy, they are good. And they're not one of those one-hit wonders where they come in, you heard of them, they sing two songs,
they've
and the
got
rest
whole
of them you never heard of
albums.
before.
Sure.
Yeah, they could have
All
sung
big
for
hits.
2 shows and never repeated the same song, and you knew every one of them.
Yeah.
Kind of like ABBA or something, where you, no matter what they sing, you've heard it. Now, Roy, we do want to, this is usually the part of the show, at least when I'm the co-host, is we talk about the personal part about everybody. But I'm going to ask you, I just came from Norway. The waters there is pretty good, right?
Except for the submarine that sank in the Baltic Sea that's leaking radioactivity. Yeah, it's probably okay. The fish I wouldn't eat, though.
I was in Bergen and deep in the fjords. The water looked off.
It's probably okay.
There.
But they had a leaking Russian sub somewhere up there.
I didn't need one of those pens.
But I don't think it's in the fjords.
Okay. I didn't need
Well, you know,
damn Russians.
When your fish glow in the dark,
there
could be a problem. You don't need a nightlight, though. That's
some people think I'm a little extreme because I
really
actually, I started out in research. You know, you asked me about my background. Well,
we're going to have you talk about that in just a minute.
Okay.
Now we know you came from New York, but tell us how Roy Spicer became Dr. Roy Spicer and ended up in Stewart. Give us your background, anything you want everybody to know. No, you don't have to be a thumbnail. We got 27 minutes left.
Okay, I can fill
50
it up.
listeners now that we know we got 2 more.
Yeah, I had 2 people I called to listen in. Basically, I started out as a scientist. I got a biology degree from Rutgers University. I have a master's degree in biochemistry from Fairleigh Dickinson University. I went back to Rutgers, finished up my PhD in biochemistry, and I had a car accident.
Well, for a New York guy, you spent a lot of time in New Jersey.
Yes. Well, I was born, unfortunately, I was born there. No, Jersey's okay. It's just most of it is not healthy. It's very toxic.
That's right.
The
in a lot of ways. That's an editorial comment, not related to WSTU, from a boy who's The only thing northern about him is he lives in northern Martin County. Go ahead.
So in my career path,
Had an accident.
I started working in what was my first job? Oh, Department of Health in New Jersey. I was a bacteriologist. It's my first job, so I worked there for a while.
Now, Frank wants to know about the wreck. You said you had a wreck.
Yes. Well, I'm getting to that.
Oh.
Well, you said I had 27 minutes, so this is only 30 seconds. I mean, this is just.
Yeah, we want to get to the exciting part.
I'm only warming up here. Let's see. When I have the accent, I try not to remember. So I
got back. We don't want to interrupt.
I went in the Air Force, and I was in charge of I was in the medics for 6 years.
Wow.
Came back, got a job with Ortho Research Foundation, which is part of Johnson & Johnson. Mm-hmm. And I was a biochemist. And during that time, I got into a car accident. Somebody went through a red light, smashed into me. I didn't have my seatbelt on because they didn't require it, and ripped my spine up pretty bad. And I was partially paralyzed. Damn. So I went through 6 months of therapy, didn't help, and I couldn't walk, and I had to take a leave of absence. And finally, I wound up in Columbia Presbyterian. They were going to do surgery on me. At that point, it was kind of cave level surgery. Right. It was chisels and hammers, bone grafts and everything. And they said, well, look, you could be permanently paralyzed or be where you are crippled. So the choice was, I didn't want to do that.
No.
So I found that
was not a good choice.
I found the chiropractor, believe it or not. And they used to carry me in the office. Literally, I couldn't walk. And 6 months of treatment, I started seeing some results.
Really?
And it took a year. I could walk again. And I decided to switch fields. I became a chiropractor.
Well, I tell you one thing right now, you could never tell you went through the ordeal that you've just described.
Yeah, well, it was literally a miracle for me, a life-changing event.
You betcha.
So I went to chiropractic school in New York Chiropractic College. I graduated in, 1977. I don't want to date myself. Went to practice on Long Island for a long time. And what happened was I was on the North Shore of Long Island. We had a lot of toxic waste sites.
Yeah.
A lot of toxic waste sites on Long Island. There's actually 200 or more identified now.
Oh, my.
And this was in the early stage, back in the 1980s. We had a lot of cancer.
Canal up there, right?
That's Buffalo.
That's Massapequa.
Yeah.
South Shore. South Shore.
Oh,
but yes,
I thought Love Canal was Buffalo.
Yes, up there. But the same company, what was it? I forgot the name of the company. It was down in Massapequa also. I'll think of it. Anyway, there was 5 toxic waste sites. We went out there. So I had a Geiger counter because I was in research. I work with radioactivity. Went out one day with this toxic field. It was an old industrial site. We found some radioactive levels.
That's incredible.
Told the mayor, and they called in the Department of Environmental Protection. Well, they found a massive amount of radioactive dump there. It was an old industrial waste site that made war materials, and the byproducts were radioactive waste, which they dumped in the creek. And there was a lot of radioactive material around there. And then there was other chemical toxic sites we investigated. Eventually, I was on a committee for 15 years with the EPA.
Now, what county in Long Island was that?
North Nassau County.
Wow.
And what we were seeing is a lot of cancer. So the University Hospital, North Shore University Hospital System, formed a task force. I became the co-chairman, along with another PhD environmental scientist. And we researched all the toxic chemicals in the water. There was a lot of them. And we started seeing a connection between all these chemicals and exposure to the cancers it was like a cancer cluster in the area, as well as other places we were seeing this. And that's when I decided to get into the solution part of it. And I changed my field a little bit. So I went into environmental medicine. I trained as a water quality specialist, and I started developing a company to find equipment solutions. And that's how we started the business back in 1987.
Wow.
And gradually, I shifted more and more because it was it's a big field. We started doing environmental shows, so we met a lot of doctors, holistic doctors, and we started building the business up. And it became a real passion with me to get involved with this because it's such a widespread problem. And now, 30 years later, with all the research out there, we're seeing the connections between environmental toxins and a lot of health issues. And this is where water comes in. I lecture around the country. I lecture every couple of weeks down at the Hippocrates Institute. I work with American Environmental Health Foundation. They're in Dallas. They deal with people that come in from all over the world with chemical sensitivities, very, very specific area of environmental medicine. And literally, we have to make people's homes a bubble, literally a healthy bubble. It's difficult because you're exposed to, you don't realize this, but over your lifetime, you're exposed to a lot of chemicals in the water, the air, food, heavy metals, and people get some serious illnesses, very hypersensitive to a lot of things, and they can't live a normal day lifestyle because they're restricted to their home because they can't go out. I'm sensitive to perfumes and certain chemical odors because I was exposed to chemicals when I was doing research.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand this because they don't realize that there's over 5 million people with chemical sensitivities in the United States, and it's growing. So all of this is worked into my business because now I deal with a lot of referrals from doctors, nutritionalists, different clinics around the United States that are dealing with people who have these illnesses and they need clean water and clean air, clean indoor environment. That's where our goal is.
Well, one of the things Frank and I have heard you talk before to the club and to our show, or the club show, that's always a surprise every time, is that what you do is not just local. I mean, you're very active nationally. And now that I know you've been to the Caribbean, speaking of that, when I was growing up, it was the Caribbean Sea.
Yes, it's Caribbean.
And then all of a sudden, it changed to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Who decided that?
It's the tomato.
Oh.
Yeah, potato.
So I can still call it Caribbean?
Yes.
It's not illegal to call it Caribbean?
Caribbean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the Caribbean is one of the areas we deal with. I have a contract, not a contract, but I supply the Peace Corps.
Oh.
And they have posts all over the world.
Well, I can't imagine all the water issues they're involved with.
So we get these calls, they had hurricanes out of the Caribbean, so they have posts where they literally have their people down there. It could be in Africa, it could be in Asia. I mean, places that you wouldn't even think of. Kazakhstan, I had to ship some things that are very challenging. But typically, we supply them with filters, and their medical people use our filters primarily because they've never had anybody get sick when they filter water through our filters because they're different.
Because they're having to use local water when they're there.
Exactly.
And
right.
They want to, and that little pen ain't going to work, cut it all the time, right?
Right. Well, there's a couple of steps you need. Now, hurricane season is coming up because this is part of, what we do. There's 4 steps to make potable water. If you have no supply, you have to go to your swimming pool, you have to go to a lake, or literally take contaminated water and make it potable.
Mm-hmm.
There are steps you can do that.
Okay.
We have equipment that can do that with certain procedures. So, there's a lot of phases to our business. And again, we're really primarily working with people who are health conscious. They're concerned about the water quality. They're concerned about their family's health, and people who are very sick. So that's a whole range of business that we deal with. We're not selling filters that you find in Home Depot or Costco or some of these big box stores. We don't do that. So we're at a whole different higher level, much more sophisticated, much more complete, and dealing with specific contaminants that are in the particular water that we're looking at. And it's based on testing or looking at a water report.
Now, what made you come to? It's not just you; it's you and your wife, who we've not mentioned on the show, but she
Dr.
does
Diane
exist.
Romeo,
Right?
I'll give her a plug.
There you go, Diane.
She's
she one of the two.
Right.
She one of the two is listening. Okay, Diane.
Right.
There you go. How did you guys end up down here?
Well, again, I had a chiropractic license down here since 1978. I wanted to retire to Florida.
Maybe I can ask him about my foot.
Yeah,
I think about it.
A little out of scope of my practice.
Okay.
However, so I came down here every year for license renewal. We started out in much further south. We migrated up here. We had friends up in Palm Beach Gardens. I liked the area.
Mm-hmm.
When we came up to this area, we were in Jupiter, and we started coming. I was up in Stewart late 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't a lot of development. So we finally decided to move to Jupiter. That's where we wound up first when we moved down here 10 years ago. Then we started coming up here, and I wanted a little more space. I like the area. I like Martin County. Palm Beach County's gotten a little too congested for me.
No kidding.
Yes, and I see it developing here now. Unfortunately, it's migrated up here now. As a matter of fact, we had the manager of Martin County at our meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, why do you have 3 assisted living facilities right in a mile radius of my house? And somebody in the group said, well, you won't have far to go when you need it. You're right down the street. I said, well, that's a fact. It's good. Maybe it's not so bad. But I like it up here. It's very nice.
And we think it's paradise.
Let's give out your contact information one more time.
You can call us at 800-444-3563. Again, 800-444-3563, or our website is www.cwrenviro.com.
All right. And we'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to McBiz, the radio show of the Martin County Business Exchange Club. Lee Carroll here with Big Frank Mezzapella on the board, and one of our more interesting guests here, Dr. Roy Spicer. Got to make sure to put the doctor part in there now. He's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah, he's got several degrees.
Yeah, I know. I mean, now none of those schools, by the way, are worth a damn football.
Rutgers used to have a decent team for a while back.
Yeah, they did for a couple years. Then the coach quit and they were crappy again. They hopefully they'll get their act together again. I don't know if they're going to ever win another game in the Big Ten. But anyway, but Roy, obviously those are incredibly good schools. In fact, I have a sister who has a master's degree from Rutgers. We talked about bottled water a little bit earlier in the show. We're going to run out of time. Your show could be a 2-hour show. Talk to people about bottled water. If they think they're getting bottled water, they're getting really good water, right?
Well, they think it is. A couple recent studies. One was talking about microplastics in the bottles. The problem is really the quality of the water and the container it's in. Those are the two issues, and the cost. Okay. So first thing is bottled water is very costly. It's probably more costly than gasoline in some brands.
I'm sure it is.
And second, it's not a total solution for your home. If you need clean water in the home, you have to have something for rinsing, showering and bathing, and all your consumption. So it doesn't kind of fit the bill for everything. The third thing is if you're on the road and you need to get bottled water, well, there's certain brands, I like NSF certified. That's a little blue label, says NSF on it.
Say that again now.
NSF. That's a certification agency that tests water equipment and bottled water. So if it has a blue label, it says NSF on it, that's usually the best quality. The problem I have with bottled water, and I'm drinking a little bit right here, is the plastics.
Right.
They're cheap plastics. They leach.
You're not supposed to put them in the freezer.
No, if you don't like it, blame Frank. Though. Frank's the one who gave it to you, not me.
So the heat, extracts plastic material from it. It's called BPA or phthalates. And the real problem with those, they're hormone disruptors. They affect your hormones. They're also called xenoestrogens. I'll throw a big word out there. Xenoestrogens. Sounds good. So what it does for men, it's estrogenizing your body. It's not good for your male hormones. Right. It throws them out of balance and causes certain problems. And for women, estrogen-like substances is not good because certain types of cancer use estrogen. They feed on it or it exacerbates certain types of cancers. So plastics and pesticides, plastic containers where you put hot soup in are not good because that's another extractable. They call them extractables.
Is that because it leaches out of the container itself into the product? Now, I'm looking at a bottle of water that we have right here right now. It doesn't have any kind of blue in anything on it. So that doesn't meet the standards, or at least they haven't had it tested. It doesn't mean it's bad,
but here's the study.
It's not as good, right?
I can't say it is or isn't because I have to look at their tests. Here's a general information. National Resource Defense Council is one of the agencies. It's an organization. They independently tested, I think, close to 100 bottled waters, maybe more. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that 60% of the bottled waters were okay generally. 40% weren't. That means they had contaminants in them. It could be not just plastics. It could be bacteria. It could be heavy metals. It could be other contaminants that you would find in typical bad tap water. So they weren't filtered properly, or again, they sit on the shelf and they start leaching plastics. If you want a good bottled water, something like Mountain Valley, it's very expensive, but it comes in a glass bottle, and generally it's about one of the best bottled waters I've seen. But bottled water is problematic to the most part.
So if somebody's going to buy bottled water for whatever reason, they're traveling, they need to have it, get a glass bottle of water. Is that a generalization we can make? Get glass, and then you can always recycle it and make Al Gore happy.
Yeah, if it's in glass, it's better. There are some bottled waters. Smart water is not too bad. I don't want to recommend specific bottled waters, though. I'm just giving you some general guidelines.
That's right. Nope, that's what we want.
We use, we're
off air. I'm going to have you tell me something, though.
Travel filters, when people go away, they can put the bottled water through it. There are filtering bottles, sports bottles that have filters in them. We use a lot of those that are BPA free. So it has a filter, and you can take tap water and it'll filter out the contaminants.
Now, what does BPA free mean?
It means it doesn't have leachable plastics in it. It's made by a process that's different. The polymer is more substantial, so it doesn't have loose plasticizers that'll leach out. It's not leachable.
Right.
Okay. So there are certain types of plastics that are like that. So I only have one or two plastic products, and they're all non-leachable. We use plastic housings for our filters, but it's a totally different. It's a polypropylene. It's a totally different type of plastic. It's a hard plastic.
Well, not only that, but the water's going through it. It's not sitting in it all the time, right?
Right. Well, that plus it's not leachable. It's tested and
Right.
certified by NSF. So our equipment is non-leachable. I can't sell anything that leaches anything into the water. We only want to use equipment and filter material that takes things out of the water.
If somebody has Martin County water, they're paying their $25, $50 a month water bill to Martin County. Is there a filter you can recommend to them to at least put under the sink or something that'll make their water better?
Yes. Yeah. Well, again, I had the report in front of me. Now, everybody has different levels of residual contaminants depending on how close they are to the treatment plant. Depends on how much they're adding. Usually in the summertime they add more chloramine. So you have filters that are rated for chloramine that are different than chlorine filters. It's a different material or filter material you have to use to remove it. And you can get rid of the residual lead, the fluoride, if you want to get it out. So, yeah, there are some basic filters that we have that will take out all those contaminants. And it's not the typical filters you find in big box stores.
Now, how much cost is something like that?
Generally, these filters start around $200.
Now, is that something that they would have outside their house attached to the pipe that goes into their house?
Sink filters. You could either install it, attach it to your faucet, or it's installed under the sink and have a separate dispenser. That's your basic core type of filter. And this shower filters, they'll take out chlorine. They don't take out chloramine.
Right.
To get chemicals out and chloramine and these byproducts, you need a filtration tank, which is the size of an oxygen tank, about 10 inches diameter, 12 inches diameter, 54 inches high, has a backwashing control valve, goes on the main pipe, and all the water's running through that tank. And
it stays on the outside of your house?
Outside or in the garage.
Okay.
We don't have basements here in Florida.
Right.
As up, when I sell filters in other states, they may have a basement. It can go near the water meter.
You know what else we don't have in Florida that's a lot better than up in Long Island? We don't have winter.
Yes.
There's no winter.
Wonderful. I never want to see it again. People ask me, "Do I want to go back to New York?" No, not really. I have no compelling reason to go back other than my family. But there's a lot of things different in Florida water that are different from other states. There's certain contaminants we see here. But there are typical things that are common to all water systems, and the disinfection byproducts are really the key that you have to remove. So
if somebody is listening to our show and lives in Martin County and has county water, it certainly wouldn't hurt them, and they're not going to go broke with a $200 filter. Now, How long does that filter last?
Depends on how many people. 2 people could last 9 months to a year. If you have 4 people, probably about 6 months.
So $400 a year, they can improve their water a whole lot. In general terms.
Yeah, less than that. Well, the filter replacements don't cost as much.
Okay.
They're a lot less.
Okay. Yeah. Now tell them how to reach you again.
Well, again, our number is 800-444-3563, 800-444-3563, or our website is cwrenviro.com. We have a lot of articles up there, blogging, articles I've written. We pick up articles from all over the world regarding air and water issues. So it's a wealth of information there. And if they call us, they can get a complimentary consultation. We don't charge for it.
So the company's Clean Water Revival. That's what the CWR stands for. You got to have an HH on there, hallelujah, or something like that.
Well, we named it after Creedence Clearwater. That's why.
No wonder it's your favorite band.
Yes, CCR, absolutely.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, and Frank's telling us we're running out of time here. Any last words of wisdom to people to think about from a water stand?
Well, generally, you want to take care of your health and be preventative. So all the preventative measures that chiropractors recommend, nutritionists recommend, good diet, clean organic food, and clean, safe water, and keeping your indoor environment clean. We just get to see a lot of mold down here, for example. So if you have an issue with mold, take care of it. So all these things are important parts of your health, and there's a lot of spokes on a wheel of health. We don't have to go into all of them, but my concerns and what most people that I deal with are concerned about is a healthy, safe environment, indoor and outdoor.
It's hard to be healthy if you don't have clean water. That's for sure, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to solve the Caribbean versus Caribbean
dilemma,
discussion here today.
Just one last thing.
Sure.
You talked about Mexico. Now, I work for the Department of Health, as I mentioned, and I never would go to Mexico until my brother-in-law said, "Why don't you go to Cabo San Lucas?" I said, "It's part of Mexico." No, he says, "Totally different, very high end." So I called him up, called the hotel up. I said, "How do you filter your water?" Well, when they built the plants on the Sea of Cortez where it meets the Pacific, they don't dump waste sewage in there. They put a reverse osmosis treatment plant in the basement. And the water there, when I got there, I brought all my equipment down. I had bags of equipment, filters, homeopathics, tinctures, you name it. So I got there. I was impressed. It was the cleanest water I probably had my entire life. It was amazing. A desalination plant they built right in the building. Wow. So you never know. But typically in Mexico, in most foreign countries, I don't travel to them.
I think drink beer if you're traveling.
Depends on the source water.
Yeah.
Actually, in Texas, they got some strange beers down there. Usually, you open up 2 bottles of different colors. I've had it when I was in the Air Force. Lone Star beer, I think it was.
Oh, there you go. Well, Roy, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We want you back again sometime, and appreciate you being here and telling us of all this good information.
My pleasure. Good.
You may be one of the smartest guys we've ever had on the show.
It's very, very likely. Yes, I think so.
He's definitely smarter than Mark Breckbill. I'll tell you that right now.
So if you want to increase your IQ, just stick with us, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks again.